Welcome guys to another video. So today we have a GT3 guide for Daytona road course. So this is for Daytona week 5 on the iRacing schedule and also for the Daytona special event. So we have a few cars on the GT3 Sprint series, the Simcube series. Those setups are on Premiere at the moment, and there's also hopefully going to be all the GT3s and the LMP2 for the Daytona special event in January as well, and they will also be on premiersetups.com. So have a look in the description down below guys for those setups, but let's have a look at the Hotlap and then we'll have a look at the guide. Okay, so going into the first corner, we don't need to open up the entry as much as we do in the LMP2 car, but we do want to get on the brakes quite early. So there's a little line here just before we turn in. So we kind of turn in just before this white line and we get on the brakes just as we get to this white line. So as we get to that white line, getting on the brakes, and we're aiming to just bring it out as close as possible to this white line on the entry. So braking down the gears, down into second gear, and we want to turn in just before this lighter patch of concrete. So there's a light patch of concrete just after this tarmac, and we want to turn in just before we get to that. So just before we get to that, we're turning in, apexing just after the tyre wall on the left hand side. There's some grass on the left. Just be careful not to get the left tyre too far over that grass because it will unsettle the car. There's quite a lot of camber down to the left, so just be careful you don't fall into that gap. But just get on the power nice and early, unwind the steering wheel and use the yellow curbing on the exit. Just be careful not to go too far over on this yellow curbing because there's quite a drop off on the edge which can get the right side of the tyre hooked, but you can use this curbing no problem, just don't go over it. This right then left, just make sure you put as little steering input as possible and it's full throttle. Now going into this hairpin, there isn't many braking boards, but you can use a few reference markers. So we can brake either just after we pass this pole on the left, so the third one up, or just around about the 100-meter board. Whichever is easier for you to use as a reference, use that. So just after we pass those two markers, we're onto the brakes, down the gears, and we want to turn in a bit earlier than we do in the LMP2. There isn't really a reference for turning in. This is around about where we turn in. Again, isn't really a reference, but we can aim for around about here. Use that as a reference. So aiming for this, and then we want to apex around about here. So just after the yellow curbing starts is where we want to actually hit the apex on this hairpin. So very late line. And there's a Rolex advertising board on the inside. You can use that as a reference, but unless you have triple screens, you're not going to be able to see that. So it's easier just to use that yellow curb as your apex reference. unwind the steering wheel and get on the power. And on the left here, we've got this alternate course, and we can use this to open up the exit. We can go past this white line and you won't trigger track limits, and you can use a little bit of the yellow curbing just to allow you to get on the power nice and early. Now for this high-speed left-hander, we want to turn in around about this point here. So as you see, the white line's going this way and then it goes to the right, and at that point where it changes, that's around about where we want to turn in for this left-hander. So around about there we begin to turn in. It's just a very gentle turn in, quite a late turn in for this corner because we want to be on the left on the exit, but it's full throttle. Just be careful on the outlap because it's very, very slidey on cold tyres, especially in the GT3s and LMP2s. So just be careful on the outlap, especially in the special event, that you don't spin there. Just give it a little bit of a lift. Now for the braking for this hairpin, we're looking for the left side of the track, and around about where this escape road starts is where we want to get on the brakes. So just after we pass that, we want to get onto the brakes. A fairly late turn in. We're trying to aim for just after this yellow curbing starts on the right hand side, but as you see, still on the brakes all the way up till we get to this yellow curbing, and then just as we touch that yellow curbing, then we get onto the power, unwinding the steering wheel, and we can use a little bit of that yellow curbing on the exit if we need to, but most of the GT3s you don't, but if you can, it's good to use it on the exit. Now this left-hander, on the exit we're going up a hill, so we want to make sure that we're on the power nice and early. For a braking reference, we're looking on the right hand side, and just as this escape road starts on the right hand side, that's where we want to get on the brakes, down into the gears, and we want to turn in just after this yellow curbing disappears on the right side. So just after that disappears, we want to turn in, and we want to take as much of this yellow curbing as possible. We can take a little bit of the gravel on the inside, just be careful not to trigger the track limit warning, but you can take a little bit of that gravel, get on the power nice and early, and then unwind the steering wheel. Don't go all the way over to the right here because you're just making the track longer than it needs to. Bring it back over to the left and just try and make this as short as possible. On the exit here, we want to get nice and close to this white line and then bring it up onto the oval. Just make sure that you're back onto the oval before those cones, because otherwise it's a slowdown. And then just drive as close to this yellow line as possible. So for the chicane, we're looking for the flag board here. It's between the 2 and the 1 board, and we want to use this flag board as our braking reference. Brake down the gears, down into 4th gear, and just try and keep the car as smooth as possible with your steering and braking inputs. Now we want to use a lot of curbing on the entry. As we see here, way more than we can use in like the prototypes. So we can take a lot of this curbing, try and avoid the sausage curb on the inside, just use all of the blue and yellow curbing, and then into the right hander. As soon as we come off that curb, we want to put a little braking. So as we see, we go over this curbing, we're off the brakes as we're turning, and then as soon as we straighten the wheel, then we increase the braking a little bit, and then we're off the brakes just as we get to this curbing. We just use the blue and yellow curb here, and then let it come to about the middle of the track. Don't let it go all the way over to the left, just around about the middle. Coasting, tiny little braking there as you can see, and then getting on the power before we get to the second part of the chicane. And then we're aiming to put the front right in the gap between this sausage curb and this blue and yellow curbing. So put the car there, and then on the exit here we can straight line it, and we can actually take some of this anti-cut curbing as well on the left side. Just be careful not to trigger the track limit warning, but it's quite stable over that second part of the chicane. As long as you're on the power before you hit the curbing, that will lift up the front of the car on the second part of the chicane, and the first part of the chicane is just trying to be really smooth with your trail braking. And now to finish off the lap, we basically just drive as close to the yellow line as possible. To make the exit of the chicane nice and short, we want to be onto the oval just before it changes from this grey black tarmac to the yellow line. Just before that happens, we want to be back on the oval, but you can get on the oval as late as those cones. But when you get to those cones, if you're still below the yellow line, then you're going to trigger the slowdown. But just to finish off the lap, you just drive as close to this yellow line as possible all the way to the end. But that is it for the track guide, guys. Like I say, this is for the GT3s for both week 5 and the special event, and hopefully we'll have setups for every GT3 car for the Daytona special event, and we'll also have setups for the LMP2. But as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and see you again next time.